I don't have them. I have no
Okay,
control.
we're live. Teresa, go ahead.
Hi, welcome aboard, all you ground troops spinning around smartly on the planet. This is an exciting time to be alive. It's February 2024. This is our first season, but we've been around for many, many years, and we've been doing, all three of us, shows and radios and events, and we're all ufologists. And you could say we're all into esoterics. So, in case you don't know us, I'm TJ Morris, Teresa J. Thurman Morris, and I have TJ Morris ET Radio Show. And Janet Carroll Lessin was with me from Maui, Hawaii. Oh, by the way, I'm in Texas. I'm right outside of Austin in Buda, beautiful Buda. Janet is in Maui, Hawaii with Aquarian Media, Aquarian Radio all these years. We've all been doing this since 2012. And Bret Lueder of, I guess, somewhere in California. I know it's near Sacramento or Chico or San Jose. Where are you, Bret Lueder?
Depends on what time, but I've been to all those places. But I'm currently near Chico, California, in Northern California, about 2 hours north of Sacramento.
All right. So we've got Texas, Hawaii, and California representatives, and we all claim to be authors, and we're all independent contractors, and we're all working together on various topics because we have been handling the paranormal for many, many years. So, welcome everybody that gets a chance to see us working together. Now, each week we take a different person and put them on the hot seat until we get tired of each other and getting our stories out there to the public. And then we'll start on all you guys in our group. So, Bret, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll let Janet, and we'll take it away.
All right. Thank you. Always a pleasure to see you ladies. My name is Bret Lueder. I'm an author of 2 books, about to be 3 books. The current book is about to be published. It's called Agents of Ascension, UFO PR. And it's just basically about how public relations has been used to control the UFO narrative, and then the reasons why that is. It has to do everything to do with today, what's going on with politics and the border and Ukraine and all this good stuff, right? And I also do my own podcast. It's called The Bret Lueder Show. I post on BitChute and Rumble, and then share those links across a few other platforms like Telegram and LinkedIn and etalk.tv. I recently just decided that YouTube really sucks because they banned my second episode with Dr. Len Horowitz. And it's because of incorrect medical information, even though he's well researched and cites all his sources. But that's the second one out of like 15. My episode 9 was censored with military whistleblower Second Lieutenant Scott Bennett, and he talked about vaccines in that, and of course that outs his book Shell Game, outs all of Obama and how Obama was working through a Swiss bank to finance terrorism for 9/11. And then I didn't post for like a year. So I thought, you know what, I'll give it a try. YouTube is still the biggest, most popular. And within 5 episodes, they banned Len Horowitz. So that's 2 episodes in like 12 or 13, 14 episodes. So I think I'm pretty much done with that. I just posted a thing telling people to just go to BitChute and Rumble or eTalk TV, or look for me on Telegram, LinkedIn. And case in point, I just watched that Montauk documentary that you sent us, Janet. It was very interesting, but like a commercial every 5 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just, I couldn't leave to go like do something and listen to it because a commercial would pop on. So I'm pretty sick of the YouTube thing, but I'm trying my best to be happy still.
So, okay. Well, thank you for joining us today, because I've got many channels on YouTube, and I guess I'm fortunate enough to claim paranormal. And so science, we call it parapsychological episodes, basically, but we deal with a lot of interesting topics that not everybody wants to talk about. But, you may hear something here you may not hear anywhere else. So, Janet, Lessin, give us a little rundown on what you want to talk about today. You're going to be on the hot seat.
I'm on the hot seat, so I'm following your direction. You guys are going to ask me questions, and I'm going to do the best I can to answer. But we're dealing with paranormal, ufology, secret space program, all kinds of different things on this show. And Teresa and I have a lot of experiences in both those areas. And Bret, we haven't had Bret on the hot seat yet, but that'll be down the line here.
I've escaped it so far.
Bret Lueder. But I run Aquarian Media. I live in Maui, Hawaii. I have a cat colony. I think there's about 20 cats on my property that we spay, neuter, and feed. Anybody wants to send money? Yes, we'll take it. Send cat food, ship it through Amazon, whatever. We will take it because they're all hungry and they're very cute. But then I have a husband, and he's wonderful. He's taking a nap, and he's listening to us. Later on, when we get down, he'll wake up and say, "Hey, I listened to the whole show." So he's able to do that while he's sleeping, but he has to rest. He goes out and does yoga, meditation, and runs on the beach. And he's 83 and a half, and he just runs circles around all of us. So he's doing pretty good. But anyway, I'm interested to see what kind of questions you're going to ask. Part of me wanted to prepare, a PowerPoint, and the other part is to direct with questions and leave. I didn't write any questions down, TJ. I didn't send any. I'm letting you two ask questions, and we'll see where we go. Like a group installed, and I'm open to the journey, to the adventure.
Sounds good, because I know that we've had a few weeks we've been doing this, and it seems like they're both really good at putting me on the hot seat and making me squirm. So, Bret, you want to start with Jan? Anything? Like, I want to know a lot of things about her and her life, but how she got into ufology and all that, because that's our mainstay. But what have you got in esoterics or anything? You and Janet have known each other for a very long time in the circle of events in California, because I know Janet
had meals together at restaurants.
Yes, Janet and her husband, Dr. Sasha Lessin, is Alexander Philip Lessin, PhD, and they've been very well known for the study of the ancient wisdom and New Thought teachings, as well as setting up a huge universal tantra school up and down California. They were very well known before anybody even knew who they were. But I'd like to know how much Bret Lueder knows, because Bret, why don't you start with when you first met Janet or heard about Janet before 2012, because you apparently knew about her before you and Lorian got started. And I'll leave it at that.
I think it was right around the same time, because in 2012 was when I released my second book, A UFO Hunter's Guide, and I went on a bit of a tour up and down California to different MUFON groups to give lectures. That's when I met Lorian. I met Lorian in Sacramento in 2012 or early 2013, and then I think it was Janet after that. I met Janet and Sasha both. Correct me if I'm wrong, Janet, at one of the events in Santa Clara in 2013 or 14 in Santa
I've
Clara.
lost track of time, but that sounds about right time frame.
That sounds somewhere in there, right? And I know I was very fascinated with Janet because she was a Sitchin scholar, and so was her husband, Dr. Sasha Lessin. And I had actually been certified as a Sitchin scholar as well. I went down to LA, attended like the 3 or 4 day seminar. I forget what it was. Got Zechariah to sign the paperback copies that I had at the time. And a funny story, I got to interview him for a big article I did for this magazine here in Chico, California. It was called Hump Magazine. And so my editor and publisher, DNA, he thought it was the world was going to hell in a handbasket, right? So he says, you might as well just hump. So he called it Hump Magazine, right? And so he sent me down to see Zechariah Sitchin for the first time at a Jewish synagogue in Berkeley. And that was when I got my first real dose of him, read a few books, finally got him on the phone. And, I'd read some Neil Freer books where Zechariah writes the foreword to Neil Freer's 2 books, God Games and Breaking the God Spell. And so I thought it would be great to ask Sitchin about Freer and how Freer was really able to take Sitchin's work to a level that Sitchin hadn't. No knock on Sitchin at all. Sitchin covers a wide variety of things, right? But Freer really seemed to hone it in about how the personalities of the gods were still to be seen in the personalities of the cultures that they ruled over today. It was a fascinating concept. So I asked Zechariah Sitchin about Neil Freer, and he immediately, he got salty on me. And, I don't want to talk about anyone else's work except my own. And I'm just, so I didn't, I don't want to argue with my elders, right? So I just
Right.
went, so come full circle back to LA, in like 90 or 91, I think it was. I'm waiting in line to get him to sign my books and sign my certification. And so I go, hey, Zachariah, this is Bret Lueder. How you doing? Do you remember me from our conversation? Right. And he's signing my book, and he looks up above his eyeglass rims and goes,
Uh-huh.
yes, I remember. And that's it. He didn't say
That's
another
it.
word. And I was just like, okay, I will not try to engage you in conversation anymore.
Yeah.
So
Well, where do you want to take Janet with her studies? Because when I met her, we talked about the Garden of Eden as one of our first mutual books. And then we talked about the 12th Planet and Zachariah Sitchin's books. But she and I go way back. But I thought I met you in 2012 for some reason. I don't know if I thought it was through Harold or anybody else. I don't know. But I thought we even had you on the TJ radio show in 2012.
we did. That's where I met you.
Yeah.
That's where I met you,
Okay.
TJ. And I don't know. I don't remember if Janet was on that show, but
I don't either. I could look it up, but not now. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So
Probably
but
have
we can get to Harold on a different time, TJ.
Right.
Okay, well,
That's a whole story there. But so for Janet tonight, I think let's start with some Sitchin. Why? And I think this is a great vehicle to go in a number of different directions. You take it where you want, Janet. Why do you think Zachariah Sitchin's work is so important to be learned and understood today?
Because it gives the alternative to the Bible. It's all based on the original text, the Akkadian and the Sumerian text. Hold on, I get a drink.
Akkadian and Sumerian original folks.
Yeah, so it goes pre-biblical, goes back 450,000 years. And for me, it answered a lot of questions that I had about the Bible because it didn't compute. How do you get two of every animal with the waters rising and they're all over the planet, right? So did we have teleportation? How did you fit them on a ship? How come they didn't eat each other? I mean, all these different, what happened with Adam and Eve? And so I've been studying all that stuff because of, what was his name? The one in the 60s, Eric von Daniken. So I started back in the 60s. I was born in 54. So I was a teenager, and so Sitchin followed up after von Daniken. They were contemporaries of each other. Of course, they don't talk. The problem with them talking with each other and about each other, you get into this argument. So Sitchin didn't like to fight. So he withdrew from being on any kind of platform with anybody else because he didn't want to get into the debate that humanity loves to do. Yes, but, and there's been a lot of smear campaign against Sitchin, and he's no longer around to defend himself, and it still continues to this day. So he didn't want to be involved in those type of dynamics. So he said to Cody Robin Johnson, who were good friends of Sasha's, who I met in 1997, and he said, I'd like to do my own certification program. So his was in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So we flew out to Santa Fe. We hung out with Sitchin. There were all these Sitchinites. They were the people that traveled with him around the planet. He, for years, while he could, he visited the sites. He had the largest collection of artifacts and cuneiforms in a private collection in the world. It's probably worth millions of dollars. We don't know what happened to this when he passed in 2010. We don't know where the stuff is, who has it. His family was not really into his information. So I hope it didn't end up at the end of a dumpster because it's very valuable, but that's another story. Anyway, so when I read The 12th Planet somewhere in the late 70s. I forget what year it was published, 76, 77. My brother, who's 7 years older, was a Sitchin fan already. So we're talking about early 80s. And one Christmas, he bought me the whole series up to date. I started the Penn State UFO discussion group. I lived at State College, Pennsylvania. And so we were looking for subjects to discuss with our, and you had to be on your toes because these are very sharp students. It was mainly a student population, some of the local population, but we had to be sharp. So my brother, who had been, he's got a brilliant mind that he mastered the material. He had to drive up to State College with his family. He was 3 hours away. They stayed at my house. He presented in the class there. He went like 3 hours without any note, and then just answered every question. So that was my first experience with somebody that could really master this material. And then, of course, life led me to Dr. Lessin. And when I met Dr. Lessin in 1997, he was best friends with Cody and Robin, who ran the Prophets Conference. They came over for dinner one night. They said, we'd like to have you start working with us at the conferences. They helped us monetarily if we came and worked the conference, gave us a room, that type of thing, made it affordable. And then they said, we're doing the Zechariah Sitchin certification program. So this must be a later program than yours. That was probably in 97, 98, right? So you had been to his things that he did.
You know what? Honestly, I think I misspoke. I'm a decade off. So it wasn't 1991. It was 2001 is more than likely. 2000, 2001 is.
Well, we were probably at the same events.
Could have been.
If you were in a Sitchin certification program,
yeah,
you probably got on the mailing list, and so you were part of there. There are some group photos out there. Anybody who was at the Sitchin things, if you have the group photo, I moved and I lost this group photo, but every year we all got on stage and they took a group photo. So if that would be great if we could find that and see. There you are, Bret. There's us. Yeah. So let me see what was the end of that. So we went to the certification program. Of course, since they were putting it on, we had some private lunches with him. He wasn't very talkative. Right. He's a funny old man. He's just very. He's a scholar. He likes to study. I love the man. He was kind of guarded, but then. After he wrote The Lost Book of Enki and he had open heart surgery, he said, he said, I sat down on the end of my bed and I didn't know if I was going to make it through the surgery because he was in his 80s. He never let us know how old he was. That was a big secret for a long time there. But he said, he prayed to Enki. He said, Enki, if you really exist and if you let me live, I will write another book. And, he made this bargain with the Enki if you get me through surgery. And anyway, they had to split him from end to end because they opened up his chest and they did full massive surgery. Back then, that's how they did it. And then when he was on the stage, the next time I saw him, he recovered and he said, well, what happens when they do open heart surgery? He says, they open your heart. So he was a changed man. He was more receptive, more flowing, more loving. And then anyway, they're at the end there. Nobody could find him. His family had put him in a home somewhere. The guy who ran his website flew in from California, went to New York, found him, and Sitchin fell into his arms crying. And he said, oh, you found me. And anyway, they had a little reunion, but he passed soon after that. And then I think, if I recall correctly, the man that was the head of his website was kind of like an assassination. He was murdered. So there's some backstory here, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sorry if I make mistakes, but sometimes I get confused because there's so much history and all this stuff that we've covered. I just I get confused on who did what, when, where, and how. So that's how we got involved. So when I met Dr. Lessin, here's where the Gods of Eden comes in. I've been a lifelong UFO experiencer. I've had experiences with ETs all my life. And it's like, how do you tell the man that you're in love with that you've been abducted by aliens? There's a question. How do you tell the person you love? So what I did is I put the Gods of Eden, because he's an anthropologist. And I said, well, this was kind of like a really good general book, The Gods of Eden by William Bromley. I put it on the back of the toilet. That's where men read. They meditate. So it sat there for a while. And he came out one day and he said, do you know what this is? I go, yeah. He goes, are there more? I go, yes. So we went down to Borders and we bought every book they had on the shelf in the series. And he very quickly mastered it in just a month or two. And then we went to the certification program. So he was interviewed at that. He mastered it to the degree that I look back and go, wow, you did really well. You were new to this subject, to that particular subject. But he had been an anthropologist through the Pacific Islands, and he had seen a lot of anomalies and heard a lot of stories back in the 60s. He's 83. And so, he was aware there were things that didn't compute, especially when you're talking in anthropology and the missing link and all that stuff. So this was right down his alley. So he has a PhD in anthropology from UCLA. So he was so excited. And here we are. We've written, I think we have 6 books written, and I've got another one. I have it outlined. I just have to, set aside the time and shut off the phone and just focus on it. It takes me about 3-4 months to pound it out because I have it all figured out. I just have to physically. I type about 85 words a minute, so it's not that hard once I just get to it.
You're lucky.
Like Theresa types 1,000 words a minute and can produce a book overnight.
Wow.
I took it in college. What can I say?
Because
Yeah,
TJ's an ET robot.
She's a
ET
robot.
robot.
Yeah.
Okay, TJ, go for it.
Next question.
Well, we've covered 2 great people that, for those of you listening, William Bramley was a great author, and it's The Gods of Eden, and he's passed, and he was a great physicist and author. And, of course, Zecharia Sitchin, which is The 12th Planet. So those are 2 books. If you're interested in what we do, these are 2 very good books, of course, with who Janet mentioned, Eric von Daniken. And can you see me okay? Because my screen's gone black. And
Yeah, you're a little bit down. You need a booster seat. Or
Right? You guys both need a booster seat.
There we go. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I forgot one thing. Neil Freer. You mentioned Neil. We just love Neil. Neil hung out with us. We would go to conferences and share meals, and we really enjoyed his perspective and what he added. And we were there his last interview before he passed. He said, I'm dying. And, oh no, Neil, you can't die on us. He said, he was in his 80s. He says, I have congestive heart failure. There's no cure for me. I'm, just really old. And he said, I know I look young, but I am at the end of the road. So he apparently froze his head. He believed in that someday they're going to there's a place where you can freeze your head. And he says, I'm hoping that they'll revive, develop the technology to revive. Yeah. So that was interesting. So that was the end of Neil.
Okay, TJ.
So back to you, TJ.
All right. Well, these are authors that have been both in our collective consciousness, I guess, but as authors of reading about extraterrestrials from other authors' standpoint. So what we'd like you to do now is learn about the 3 of us and why we're interested. So Janet, why are you interested in the books like that, The 12th Planet and The Gods of Eden? And how did that get you set on this ET journey? Because not everybody's on it. And for so many years, they've made fun of people like you and I. I don't know if Bret wants to be included in that, but you and I are considered ufologists and alienologists, along as parapsychologists, because of the kind of work we do. Bret, I don't know that he's ever claimed those hats. Mine are on my books, and I've been asked, why am I a ufologist, even by Jan Aldrich when I became one, because it was on the back of my book in 2007, right? When I was writing for UFO Digest. So when do you think you became a ufologist and alienologist? And then before that, when did you get interested in ET books?
I was a contactee since birth. In the crib, I've been interacting with aliens my entire life. I've always seen ghosts. I've astrally projected. I was seeking answers. I started with Eric von Daniken. I studied Edgar Cayce. I'm a nerd. I'm a readaholic. I just was like, what is going on? Because I lived in a normal Christian Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania family. I had to watch what I said because, of course, you get judged and they think you're crazy. I loved it when Star Trek came along. I became a Trekkie. I went to the early conferences, not the first one, the second and third in New York City. We had 20,000 people there, and there was another 20,000 people that had tickets. They were trying to get in. Somebody had they printed all these extra tickets, and so they were. I remember coming down to the lobby, and I looked out, and there was police and the masses of humanity, and they were trying to get in. It was cold. It was February, and I'm going, "What is going on?" And I said, "We're those who made it in here. We've got the real tickets, but they had fake tickets." So But at these conferences, there was Eric von Daniken. I mean, not like there was Robert Heinlein, Isaac Asimov, Gene Roddenberry, and J. Allen Hynek, and other ones, the early science fiction authors. And so we expressed what was going on in the galaxy through our science fiction. And so we would have these very high intellectual conversations about the concepts of what's going on. People weren't really talking much about abductions, but we did have Barney and Betty Hill had come through, and right around the 1970, that movie came out. So we had all this information that was there at these conferences. So these were the first UFO conferences, but they were under the guise of science fiction, and we were talking about it, figuring it out. And so Roddenberry, I think that he was a major visionary because we lost Theresa. Because what I heard later in the green room at some of these conferences is people were saying, things that you don't really get on stage. And they were saying that Roddenberry was an experiencer and he had connections. He had information and he was conveying it through. The only way they could back then was through science fiction. I hope Theresa can get back here.
Yeah, we just got to roll it.
We'll just keep rolling.
She'll come back.
Okay, she'll come back. So anyway, so back then we had a campaign because so I'm an experiencer, science fiction, the movies and television up until that till Star Trek was all about the green slime and aliens were evil and all kinds of weird things. I mean, Twilight Zone and Outer Limits did a pretty good job in conveying the different potentials of alien contact, and some of them were monsters, but some of them were challenging intellectually and invited you to contemplate other possibilities. But when Star Trek came around, they had their first intelligent alien who was the second in command of a starship. And it's like, wow. Okay, so Brenda's trying to help us. Okay, hopefully Brenda can help Theresa get back on.
Yeah, okay.
So then we launched a campaign because after the third season in '69, they were threatening to cancel. No, actually, after the first season, they were threatening to cancel Star Trek all along, and that was our, experience of having intelligent extraterrestrials. So we started a campaign to keep the show on. So we just bombarded NBC with letters. So that was like the first fan base thing of influencing the media. And so they renewed it then, and then the second time, and then finally canceled in '69. So we were like set adrift, and we didn't know what to do with our energy. So we started the conferences, and we kept, working on it. And finally, it took a while. I think it was the first Star Trek movie was the movie, not the series. I think it took until the late '70s before we finally got another shot at it, or somewhere in the mid to late '70s. That's right. So anyway, next question. That kind of any follow.
Well, so Star Trek, right? I grew up watching Star Trek, sitting with my dad on the couch, and so I couldn't help but draw a correlation between Captain Kirk and my dad. So I kind of saw my dad a little bit as Captain Kirk, but I definitely was of that generation that grew up with Star Trek. So I've literally had science fiction programmed into me since I was very young. So many ways to go with the Star Trek thing. Gene Roddenberry, one story that I've heard was that he channeled the Galactic Federation, the idea of a Galactic Federation, through a seance. So, but I haven't been able to corroborate that. So it's just rumor until then. So, but whether it's a seance or a contact experience with an alien, something obviously influenced him. He didn't just make this stuff up with an imagination. Right. Some experience guided him. So you felt you were more credible as an experiencer or a researcher in UFOs after Star Trek came out, because Star Trek helped to normalize aliens in society. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I was a child. I was, here she comes. Let me add her quick.
Yeah, sorry, I got knocked off. I'm back.
That's okay. Let me go back to Bret just asked the question. So I I was just a student in high school, and I was, dating and getting married and doing all the normal things that people do. I didn't identify with being a researcher or anything more than just a fan, and very interested in solving my own mysteries in my life, because I had an intense amount of contact, and I would have groups of friends. Let's sleep in the backyard tonight, and we would see things in the sky. I lived in Pittsburgh, which was a hotbed of UFOs. I had over this place called Neville Island. These big orbs would just come out, especially in the summer. I guess we were out more and paying attention. And I would say, okay, do you want to see a UFO? And I started doing like uh, calling them in, I guess, say, like Stephen Greer. But this is back in the 60s. I'd say, do you want to see a UFO? Okay, sure. I don't believe in them, but okay. So I would, say, let's walk here at this time. And there they would show up. And these orbs were gigantic. They were like 30 feet across, and they weren't that high in the sky. And they would manifest 2, 3 in a row. And I go, okay, what are you looking at? Because I didn't want to lead the witness. What do you see? And I'd have them describe it. I go, okay, so we're having the same experience. But my main thing was my bedroom was just full of ghosts and extraterrestrials. I believe in looking at this information that my house is located on top of an interdimensional portal. And I used to have friends come over. You want to sleep over my house? Okay. And then what did you see? What happened? They would often had experiences. Some of them were even more intense than what I had. Some of my friends were curious, and they would come back. Some said, I am never sleeping over your house again. Your place is haunted. I think that back then I just categorized everything as UFOs, but looking at it now, knowing what I know, I said, no, some of those, those were extraterrestrials. They were ETs. And I had experiences where I went down under the house, and I kept going down to the netherworld, to the underground cities, and I had like a very rich experience of that ongoing from birth, to this day. I sometimes go underground. I go to different places. So my waking world and sleeping world are just full of so much information. I'm not sure what to do with it. But then when I met TJ, it's like, wow, you're like me. You've had all these experiences. And plus, we end up working with the military, which we'll cover over time. And you have to be careful with the military, because we don't want to end up unalive, so to speak. So we tell them to respect the military. But what I realize is that if they don't want you to say something, our screen will go blank. We'll lose connection. I mean, they have a way of not letting it get out if they don't. I mean,
we've seen already today.
I thought today was
ET.
I had no electricity for 3-4 hours coming into the show. It's like, oh, are we getting screwed with today? But then maybe we're supposed to be talking, because like 10 minutes after the start of this show, my electric magically came back on. They go, okay, we're supposed to do this. Let's rock.
Yeah. That is strange, isn't it? Her electricity's been off all day. She called me. Well, where do you want to go with this, Bret? Because I find it curious that we're even doing the show, the three of us together, and yet all of us have. What do we all have in common? And Janet, you seem to be the clue, keeping the glue happening, the magic.
Okay. I just I got to ask a question while you were gone, TJ. So why don't you go ahead and ask another one?
Well, mine is synchronicity, and the fact that you two have been to a lot more events. I was a ufologist, like I mentioned, and classified that in 2007 officially, like a public figure for my reasoning of being an investigator, whether in or out of country or in or out of uniform. But the one that was handling the ufology before people even knew I did any, but I didn't retire till 2017. But Janet, you and I met somewhere around 93, 94 through the Spiritual World Network. And I know Brenda's listening, and Jim here in Texas, and they don't know our story. So why don't you tell them how we met? And I find it curious how you and Bret and I got together for this whole scheme of keeping ufology and alienology alive with what we're doing, paranormal and esoterics. You know what I'm talking about? How did we get together with
that?
people?
Yeah. So I think it was 93, early 94. I'm not sure when you left Oahu. When I left everybody I knew, I flew to Oahu. I had met a man on the internet. I was married and miserable. I needed a new life. I was diagnosed with lung disease, and the pulmonary specialist said you're not going to live very long if you don't get into a better environment. The part of the state that I lived in was where they had a lot of acid rain, and I was going downhill fast. I was just catching pneumonia every year. I had like a death rattle right before I left, and anyway, just having problems with the husband number two. I don't blame him for anything. It's just our dynamics were not jiving. So I ended up, I didn't do it right. I ended up meeting a man on the internet. I was working at Penn State and I got an internet account. And it's like, internet, what's that? And back then, only the governments and the universities had the accounts. So I got involved with the local UFO community. I expanded it with some of the people that lived there. We had a very big spiritual community, much like when I went to Oahu, what you had already organized before I got there. It was amazing. They would pool their resources and raise funds and bring in a new speaker all the time. So when I was at Penn State, I brought in Linda Moulton Howe. So from there, I finished that thing. We did an event. We had NBC, CBS. We had about ABC. We had about, I forget if it was somewhere between 300 and 600 people, 300 to 600 people. So then I wrapped up things with my husband. I had one friend in Hawaii. It was a man I was having an internet affair with. I was the very first internet divorce. His wife was mad at me. We were both married and miserable. So that it's just what happened. I can judge it and say I was a bad girl, but it's like, it just happened. We were married and miserable, and it really fixed his marriage. And so I go, and he's still with her. I go, I'm really happy you resolved your issues, and it happened, by hanging out with me. But bless you, and you're on your way. And so when I came here, I said, what do you do in Oahu, right? But I was so happy because I could breathe, and I got out of the cold, and I was floating on air. I was so happy, and I didn't know anybody but one person. But I said, what do you do here? So thanks to Theresa. I'm not sure you did it all by yourself, but there was a huge spiritual community in Oahu. And so
Yeah,
I
it
went
took a
to
lot of people.
dancing and your spiritual center and Psi World seminars. Now, some of those things were fronts for recruiting people who were psychic. And there's Teresa's psychic, and I'm psychic.
There's Janet.
And they were doing things like remote viewing and all this psychic stuff because they were, and that's where this is where I think we got recruited. Or you probably before, because you were recruited back when you were a teenager after the show, the James Bond show. So I think they're tracking the people that have these abilities, like Allie in Taken at birth, coming in even. My theory is that they have a soul tracker, like they can see who's coming into what body where, because we were both told by, I'll call them whistleblowers. I had an agent say, we were tracking you coming in. I go, what do you mean tracking me coming in? He said, no. He says, we have a room in, what is that? The Navy base, Norfolk in Virginia? No, that's anyway. I'm not sure what, but we have a whole room dedicated to you and you coming in. I go, me? But I think that there's some powerful contacting experiencers that these they're aware of. And so you start looking at your life. That very young Theresa had these things where people were I mean, they knew about you, Theresa. It's just obvious. And so you got recruited earlier. I've had similar experiences wherever I go. I mean, this extraordinary attention paid to me. Why? I'm not that interesting, but these are high ranking people. I would go and say, I just want to work an easy job like a receptionist, and they kept recruiting me into these jobs that were more complicated. And I'm always hanging out with the president of the university or the CEO. It's like every time I don't want to do a real fancy job, it's like, no, you have to go up here. You have to. It's not that I'm not smart. It's something else going on. So in Oahu, it was fabulous. I was warmly greeted by this whole community. They were doing all this spiritual stuff. I went Sufi dancing. If you ever have a chance to go Sufi dancing anywhere, it's so high spiritual because it's non-denominational, and they anyway, it's like a puja, it's like a tantric ritual, which people don't understand that because I don't know what's going on with the tantric community. But so I kept meeting. I was experimenting with relationships because I was single for the first time. I had been in a continuous relationship since I was 13 years old. So I turned 40, and it's like, well, if I'm going to ever time to experiment, I'm an adult now, and I can figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life. And so I got involved with the tantra community and studying about relationships and sexuality, and all these things led me to meeting Sasha, Dr. Lessin, and he has a whole other story which I'll fill in. And I met Teresa. So what I recall about our meeting, Teresa, is that you were this tall woman in the middle of your spiritual center, and you were somewhere up front with Reverend Higashidi, and what was his name? The psychic, the channel.
The one
Arthur Pacheco.
Arthur
Pacheco.
Pacheco.
I loved Arthur Pacheco and Reverend Higashidi. And Reverend Higashidi gave me a free scholarship to go to this inner circle group that was doing this intensive work. And apparently you had been a part of it, but you weren't going to be in the one that he wanted me to come to because you were leaving. So we pieced this together. So I'm coming, Teresa's going. We'll share that episode of how she got recruited to go back to the mainland because she had to go do a bunch of stuff in the mainland and meet Thomas Morris.
Yeah, I was shocked actually because we had a spiritual meeting. We had a very nice, I guess you could say, mansion for. I lived with a couple of other women at the time. Her name was, what was her name? Teresa. I don't know. She swam with the dolphins and did that, but yeah, I guess you didn't come to that meeting, but you came to another meeting, and that meeting was at another lady's house where they took you. You were new to the island. They asked me to take you under my wing, so to speak, because you were a Halle. Most of the people were locals or Japanese, and we were the two white girls that stood out like a sore thumb in that group. Right. It just happened to be that way, and I was in a suit and heels at the time. We've had Spiritual World Network, we had Psychic Network, and we had all that going on at the Hilton Hawaiian Village. And we were meeting there at the Hilton with the Spiritual World Network. Uh-huh. So the first time I remember you is, well, two times. Once was downtown Waikiki with Robin, which we've talked about, the psychic, down there. And then again there, I was introduced again, and my mind was trying to remember if you were the same girl with Robin down in Waikiki, which there's not that many Halles running around in the spiritual community, believe it or not, at that time. So you sort of stood out. And so, I met you there in that environment of the Spiritual World Network, or SWN, on a Sunday. And then the third time I remember you was when you came to the psychic big thing that we had organized for all psychics.
Also, I sat behind you as you drove your Cadillac, and you took us up to the I call it like the fairy lady's house. So we kept meeting each other, but I was so confused because when I'm meeting hundreds of people all at once, I was in a new world, and every day I was meeting new people. It was so exciting. It was like, it was like a UFO conference, right? It's like new people everywhere. So
you had lots and lots of people at every organization. I was just running around from the spiritual world to the psychic world to people synergistically involved. And then I guess through the university and Dr. Laura Sturgis and Dr. Lessin environment and through all those groups.
So we kept meeting and crossing circles, but we didn't really, you and I never sat down and had lunch and sat across each other and had a conversation, but we were in this same circle. And so we're piecing it together. But the fairy, I call it the fairy lady, her house was decorated like early fairies. Everything was pink and purple and glitter and it was just twinkle lights. And I thought, how does her husband live in this? Because it was totally like, it was completely feminine. It was a
I remember him.
And so she drove. There was the car was full. I was in the back seat behind Teresa, so I never really saw her even her side view. I saw the back of your head the whole time. We go way up to these fancy homes on the top of a mountain.
Yeah.
They go in it. So everybody goes into that. I'm just following. I'm short too, so I'm used to just following all these tall people, and they disappear. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting in the living room across from the owner, and she starts doing a reading on me, and she says, "Oh, you have implants." I went, "Okay," because I had heard about implants. It wasn't a big thing, so I said, "Well, this is very interesting. How does she know that she never met me before? How does she know that I have implants?"
I
And
was
she
very
goes,
curious, yeah, at that
"Yeah,
time why they were taking. And Brett, this is really familiar. This is when Jan and I sort of start a different story of wondering what's going on, because they separate us and pull me in to a room with all the people that were already involved, and I was relatively new to that group at the same time. It was like my first meeting with them and Janice's first meeting, but she went in with a woman to be. And I said, "What are they doing?" They said, "Well, she's going to work on her implant." I was like, "Implants?" So we didn't know what implants were, really, neither one of us at the time.
great, yeah." It
But
was a
it
new
comes out
concept.
in that story. But go ahead. That's a very
So
strange deal that
I
night.
I definitely had an experience where I received an implant when I was probably 4 years old, and I had been out playing in the side yard. My mother would watch me from the kitchen window. I'm young, but she just needed a break. Go outside and play. And it was spring, and it was very beautiful. And suddenly I came running in because something stung me behind my ear, and it was all swollen. And she was it was right this here, and I still have it to this day. And she was so alarmed, she rushed me to the doctor. Back then, you went to the doctor, and he said, "What is it?" He says, "I don't know what that is. Maybe that's a cyst or something. Maybe we'll watch it, but maybe it'll go away." So, um, so years later, I'm reading a book by what was the earlier researcher? Not oh, I'm forgetting his name. Not John Mack, but the one that lived in New York that was doing all the regressions that he
Bud
made,
Hopkins.
Bud Hopkins. So I'm reading a book by Bud Hopkins, and this woman said that she was out in the yard and she got stung behind her ear and got taken on board and had an implant. And it wasn't a bee. I didn't know what it was. I said, "Mommy, a bee stung me," but it was a tiny drone that was insecticide, and that's how they delivered the paralysis for them to. And they beamed her up. So I said, "Oh," because there was a part that I didn't remember. They had blocked, and then I remember going in and showing my mom. So I had this huge lump behind my ear, and so the psychic lady said it was trying to negate remove my implants. She said it's in two parts and has a higher part and another part down below, and there's like a thread. And I go, she knows exactly what's going on there. And then she said, "You have some under your lymph node, you have some," and she said, "These have different purposes. Some are for tracking." She said, "There's some to prevent you from getting certain diseases because they want me to go through." And she might have been referring to when all these COVID and other things happen. We want you to survive. You need to survive. And so she was saying that I was important. I was worth tracking. They wanted me to get through this, and basically confirmed that, I have a mission here. Teresa and Troy Brett, we have a mission, and we don't know all the details right now, but that will unfold in due time. And then one more thing. So down in they've removed all this in Waikiki. There was a big open air like bazaar where they just sold all kinds of trinkets and T-shirts, and you could go. It was like a maze going through there. But right in the center is where there were two or three. It was a couple psychic chairs. Right, there was at least one, and there was a giant. It was like Avatar. It was like a fairy tale. And I lived right there in Waikiki, and I would just go over there. I was bored. I thought, let's go over and see what's going there. And so there was this wonderful lady, your friend. She's sitting there and she's doing psychic readings. Now I was dirt poor.
Banyan trees.
Huh?
The
Under
banyan trees and the
under
twinkle
banyan
lights.
trees. Yeah. and she had a little booth, and it was kind of, you had to go around the corner, and so I would put my head, hi, you want to read it? Oh, I'm sorry, I can't afford it, but I just wanted to say
several.
hi. So she would let me sit there when nobody else, because there'd be hours sometimes when nobody would come. It was certain, like lunch break and stuff, people would come. So we developed a friendship. I'm sorry, I don't remember her name, but you
Robin.
came down there, huh? Robin, right? And you came down there one time. So we keep meeting, but it's like, it was very strange.
All to do with the psychic, Bret, psychic world and the spiritual world. The spiritual world and the psychic world, when I got there, were combining, and none of the bookshops really had psychics. Somehow I wound up helping get psychics into the bookstores downtown, and then we started Sedona over at the Ward Center. A Chinese lady and her husband started that, and then a couple of the bookstores. So I wound up, not only was I president of a corporation and working in uniform for the government and being a psychic at night working, and I was doing it all, and I wanted to, and helping organize this Psychic Network Incorporated, and to do readings at all these bookstores. So it was all important. It was all encompassing part of this Ascension Age movement, and Janet and I were in it, and it was growing, and it had to do with more facets. So I remember one event I went to in Las Vegas where they had one or two or three, actually, Janet, back in that time, where the UFO people were considered not into the spiritual aspect or the New Age aspect. So they'd have a corridor, for New Age and a corridor for different things, but there wasn't one for UFO people. And so anybody that wrote a book like that was put off way to the side. So somehow during that time, Bret, we were going to expand all the events with the UFOs. And this was in the late 89 to 94. So Janet, I left there in 94. You came, right. And you came. And so Bret, all this was going on where there were psychic groups and spiritual groups and coming together and blending the different teachers. And then you want to mention, you and Dr. Lessin met Dr. Laura Sturgis, who is the one that took me under the first time for a missing time with ET.
Yeah, I had a regression with Dr. Sturgis. I'm not sure exactly how I met her, but she was very. I would go hang out with her too. I was just a seeker.
Really?
I
knew you went to her house.
Exactly how. And then when I met Sasha, he already knew Dr. Sturgis. Anyway, so speaking of Preston Nichols, she had a vibrasound machine, right?
Yes.
And so there was another one, and they said, well, this one's illegal. So I don't know what that one was, but the vibrasound wasn't illegal. So I've been in that
on the island.
Huh?
There were two on the island that I knew about, only two. They were new coming to the island. And Dr. Sturgis was one of them. It was over 7,000. Basically, it's just a vibrating table that had wiring into it.
This one had music. They
had this software.
Total immersion into the music, and it was almost like, remember that movie where the guy did Under the Water? It was like you got totally immersed in sound. And it would put you into an altered state of consciousness. So I think that's something what Preston was playing with.
It was new music.
He had in his private sessions, he had a sexual aspect as well. But we'll just stay on the spiritual aspect.
We don't know about that part. We only know about I
just read about it. Okay. Next question. Bret's smiling.
Bret,
what do you want to say, Bret?
Okay. Well, switching gears just a little bit, switching back to the ET side a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about reptilians. Janet, I know from our conversations that, you said earlier as well that you invited you're with a group that invited a number of people over to Hawaii to speak. A very vibrant group, right? Can raise funds and bring these kind of people. So one of the guys was David Icke. So in The Biggest Secret, the book where David Icke kind of outs his reptilian hypothesis that there's a interbreeding bloodlines that goes back to antiquity that have taken over the royal families in Europe, that whole thing, right? Shape-shifting. That whole thing came out in The Biggest Secret. Part of that support for that was his 2 interviews that he said he did with Monarch Project survivor and victim Arizona Wilder, and Montauk Project survivor Stuart Swerdlow.
Right.
And both, according to David Icke, both Stuart Swerdlow and Arizona Wilder said that they uh, were participants or present when these people, certain high figures, would do quote unquote satanic rituals or high reptilian kind of religious rituals that might Earthlings might call satanic, and drink blood. And supposedly one of those people was Zechariah Sitchin.
Right.
Did you ever talk to David Icke about that, or did you ever talk to Sitchin about that, or even Swerdlow? Because I know
Well,
you've had contact with Swerdlow as well.
so that's a big question, and I'll unpack it.
3 parts, 3 people.
Yeah. So the David, I came and stayed here for a month. We, I wasn't able to back the funding that was needed for the conference, so I started the process and invited David and Pamela to come over. Uh, one advantage of living in Hawaii and having a property that you have a big enough space that you can house somebody is, they wanted to come over and see the island for one thing, and I don't know about it. They had some private things going on, and we were going to help. We're relationship counselors, so we were going to help them work through some of their dynamics because I saw them at a conference and they tended to get into fights, and it was funny. But all couples fight, right? And so I said, come over and we'll just do some sessions and see what we can, because they loved each other so much, but they had trouble. They were just fighting. So about the reptilian. So when we were here, of course, David does his thing, and it's never the same thing twice. I was going through a period where I saw about 4 or 5 of his presentations in a row. I flew over to LA. I was just following him a lot, and he is just he will sit there the night before and just research, and then he'll add it to his presentation before he goes on live, and he's just he's masterful. He just can manifest it. In fact, we talked about, never mind, I won't go to that. So the reptilians, let's stay focused. So he told us how he was on a chair, getting ready to go on his show. He was a broadcaster. He did sports. He was in one chair. There was a chair in between, and the very far end was like Tony Blair or somebody at the time. And he looked over, and his eyes slit, and he shape-shifted right in front of him. Now, back to my story. Growing up in Pittsburgh, there was a portal in the backyard in my neighbor's yard. There were 2 backyards, and then there was an alley in between it. So when I would come home from playing down the street with my cousins who lived 4 houses away, I would look over towards my best friend's house to see if she was outside in the sandbox or playing on the swings or doing something in her yard. As I looked in that direction, the whole it was just like on Stargate, like it was like a watery portal. There weren't any containers. It was just the whole thing started being watery, and this being comes through, kind of like they slurp through, and then he's standing there, and he starts pulling at my third eye chakra, crown chakra, and it felt like he was trying to suck me out, and I was going to die. I was just an absolute terror. My heart was racing. I'm going, what is, and it wasn't human. It was not human. It was a hooded being. And I blocked his face for years. I could not remember what because he was so otherworldly, beyond any conception of life. So anyway, I would break free of this creature and run into my house and slam the door, and I'd fall to the floor and try to get my heart to stop racing. But I kept saying to myself, because of all the judgment, it's like, I cannot go in there and tell those people that are my family that I just saw this being in the backyard. And so I would get calmed down, and I would sneak out to bed and just be real quiet. I had a room all by myself. I was very privileged and just be with myself. Time would go by, and I would forget. It's called lacunae. When you have terror like that, fear like that, your brain, to protect you, sometimes shuts down the memory. So because you just can't operate as a sane human being. It would drive you crazy. So my brain was protecting me with lacunae, but unfortunately, I would walk down the alley again, and I'd go through this over and over. It was Groundhog Day with this being that was trying to suck my soul out. So finally, this went on for years, and it's like I just didn't get it. I didn't learn the lesson. And finally, when I was 12 years old, and I collapsed on the floor again. I'm in the kitchen and I'm going, I am not going to forget this. I will never walk down that alleyway again. And I didn't. Okay, so I'll get to the David I Park. So when my sister was a teenager, in the back alley there was a place you could pull off and park your cars. So she and her boyfriend would go and park and make out. And when they were back there, they a being came through. Now, this one she describes was more like the skinny man, but dressed like an undertaker. I'll I'll have to re-interview her, but now she has dementia. I should look through my notes. Anyway, a being came up to the car, and her boyfriend said, "We got to get out of here now, right now. He's gonna kill us." And he dropped his keys. Of course, when you're nervous, you're trying to get the key in. He dropped his keys, but he found the keys, and the creature was coming up and grabbing the door handle, and they're screaming, and he's screaming, but he gets the key and he drives away. So we start comparing notes. Both my mother and father, my mother had a stroke and my dad had a heart attack. No, my dad had a stroke and my mother had a heart attack on the same day, my 38th birthday. So I came down from State College where I was living, and we all met at the family home, and we hadn't been together for over 20 years. We sat there and said, we sat on the floor. We just collapsed on the floor. We said, what happened growing up in this house? We have to compare notes. So that's when I first heard about this being. So years later, I get Children of the Matrix because I kept getting people coming to my house. Have you read David Icke's book yet? No. So I go down to Borders and I look at that intriguing cover with the reptilian. And once I picked up that book, I couldn't put it down. I read it straight. Like it took just a couple days. And I get to the part where it has the illustration of the hooded being, and it has the reptilian face. And I just got there and I just went, oh my God. As I'm staring at this, it was a pencil, black and white rendition, but suddenly it became full color. It was like the reptilian was right in my face, and I saw his eyes. I saw the texture of his skin and everything. And it's like the memory that I've been repressing since I was a little girl came rushing back. And I go, now I've got it. Now I know who that was. And it was his, and it was like it was kind of like in Harry Potter, you know how all the cartoons and the newspaper are all, it was like he was actually talking to me through this book, and it was all telepathic. It's like, yeah, you got me. I got you. Now you know, right? So where was I with this whole story?
You wanted to emphasize your meeting
back
with
to David Icke coming to Hawaii.
So David Icke. So that's why I reached out to David Icke. I went to the San Francisco Bay Area UFO conferences where you were hanging out. I met Victoria Jack.
Right.
I started. So I would go and I'd watch David over and over at those things. Got to know him. Then they were having a falling out. David and Victoria were having a falling out. And I said, Victoria, let me see what I can do to get him to come back, because she wanted him back. So I talked to David, and so he did come back. But then they had a final falling out. But so the last one, I got him to come over. And so anyway, I've kind of been in this whole thing for years, although I wasn't putting on conferences, and I had started writing the books in that genre because I was writing in tantra and consciousness and spirituality. So David came, he did this work, he came back a second time, and so he had that episode with the shape-shifting reptilian, and then he told me that somebody called him from Buckingham Palace. They said, David, you got to get over here. He said, okay. So he He's on the Isle of Wight, so he loved trains. He would like anywhere you could get any excuse he could get to go on the trains. He loved all the trains through the UK. So he went over there, met the guy. He said, "Okay, stand right here." And when you looked in one direction, you were looking at a different uh, dimension. And then you'd look to it was like one of their labyrinths or something with their. And he goes, "Look, you can see into two worlds standing right here." So David's had an amazing life. He said that once he started having experiences, it was like some kind of hive mind. The whole world started sending him independently information about reptilians. So it was like there's some kind of information network that's trying to give us this information that we need at the time. So he realized he was being directed by, and these people know each other, and he hadn't published a book yet. So that led him to doing the research and publishing the book. But going back to the dawn of time and the shape-shifting, basically, these shape-shifting reptilians are our ancestors. And you can trace it back to Awanis, who was a sea beast, and the Anunnaki. So the Anunnaki are humanoid, but they have abilities. Even Merlin, you listen to Merlin's stories or read it. Merlin was able to go from being a little boy, and he had to go into the council, and he shapeshifted into an adult old man. So we have a whole realm of magic that we're not understanding, and our innate ability to create, shapeshifters. There's a woman called Melusine from about 600. She's one of our ancestors. She's in the royal line, and she was shapeshifting from a mermaid with two tails, like Starbucks lady. Starbucks lady is Melusine, and Starbucks has Melusine on all. There's a reason they have that symbol everywhere. They're telling us that's our ancestor. She could shapeshift into a mermaid and also into a dragon. So her story is she got so upset she couldn't hold her form when she got so upset with her husband. She had to go into a tub once a week, like Saturday night. She says, "I'll marry you, but you can't come and watch me bathe when I do this bath on Saturday nights, and you can't be there for the birth of our children." And she was very prolific, and they had lots of children. Um, but her husband was Raymond or something, Ramadan or something. I can look him up. I trace him in my tree. I am an ancestor. I am descended from these shape shifting reptilians, but so are probably all of you, because there's millions of descendants, and it's all through Europe and all over the world. We're all descended from these people because we're a hybrid species. I know it gets really bizarre, but I've been researching this and I've tracked it down. I'm a researcher, and it's like, and I can show this in it, but I'd have to do a PowerPoint. I could show you where we go back to these shape shifting reptilians in our own DNA.
Okay.
But it's not dominant, but it's recessive, and every once in a while, you might have somebody that has that ability, and that might be what you're encountering in the rituals. So they're able to pierce the veil, open interdimensional portals, and some people during these rituals, maybe they get into an altered state of consciousness. They might take entheogens or something, but at a certain point, when everything's set and setting, they can shapeshift. Maybe Zechariah Sitchin could. I don't know. Maybe it's an unknown, but that's where I stand.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Theresa, you want to wrap this up for us?
All right. Well, folks, we're all into this world together, and we call it home on this little blue marble out there. So learn more about it if you can, learn more about yourself. We're all friends in the Ascension Center Education, ACE Metaphysical Institute. We're all part of it, being authors, and we just help each other stay connected to each other. And there's a lot of groups out there, so find you one. If you're not into Mutual UFO Network, or APRO is more into more of the older guys, but Janet's in Hawaii, and she and her husband aren't taking on clients anymore. Are you, Janet? Strictly, you want to?
Every once in a while, if you need a session, I keep saying we're retired, but life brings what that brings, and so periodically, but we're not doing a full. We used to do a 40-hour week, and we're just not doing that. It's
Well,
just,
do you want to leave a way for them to contact you as
I
your
have
book?
my website is dragonattheendofTime.com. We have EkiSpeaks.com. Email me JanetLessin@gmail. And then I can direct you to where you can pick your time and date and sign up and register for a private. I'm
Facebook.
on Facebook. Yeah, there's I have I'm out there just like you are.
Social media. If you can get to me. Bret, how about you? How do you want people to find you?
Right now, you can just find me on Facebook, facebook.com/Bret.Lueder. Drop me a
Right.
message.
Okay.
Buy all my books and DVDs, please.
Yeah,
Okay.
buy our books. Yeah, we've got a dozen books or so. Teresa has books. You got to pay the bills somehow. Teresa, are you still seeing clients as a psychic?
Not here in Austin, Texas, or outside, but I hope to in the future because I've had people calling me from all over, and they know I'm not in Florida now. So if you want to work with me, you'll have to come to somewhere in Austin and give me a call, and we'll meet somewhere. But you can contact me through Bret or Janet, or here, here on the show. We have Psychic Channel Network on YouTube, and we'll post that here. And then it's Teresa J. Morris or TJ Morris CT shows, Teresa J. Morris, all on YouTube's, lots of channels. And we're doing this for educational purposes and also for disclosure, believe it or not. One of those words in exopolitics, but a lot of the groups you're going to find out have gone off in a different direction under UAP, but we're sharing as much metaphysical. And my whole thing was ancient wisdom of all that we already knew from the past, and then expanding the mind and the consciousness into the cosmos with new thought teachings. And these are the things you may hear here that you haven't heard somewhere else before. So we come together synergistically involved, and we make things happen. So that's the magic of the power of three here. And we hope you all find what you're looking for. And if it suits you and you hear it here and you like it, then please share it. If it doesn't suit you, then leave it behind. And we hope you're all on your own spiritual path, and everybody's on their own spiritual journey. So I guess we'll meet back here with Bret Lueder of Esoteric Guide Wednesday. He was the one that got us to really pull together. Janet and I each had our own shows, and he his. So Bret, you want to use this on how are we doing on E-Talk or ET Talk?
Well, I can always talk to my buddy. I just was waiting for feedback from one or both of you. So
all right, well, let him know that if he's open to it. Janet, you're okay with sharing this on ET Talk?
After we disconnect the stream, let's just stay on for a little
distribution.
Okay?
Okay. Sounds good. Well, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. And Janet's got control of the con. So, Janet,
thank you, everybody. Until next week. And stay behind for a little meeting. Thank you. Much love.